Hello there, my name is Mooseman, and today I will be informing you of whether you should play, wait, or avoid the twin-stick co-op shooter, Gunnheim. As always, we will be looking at gameplay, aesthetics, value, and future potential before making a final verdict on the early access version of Gunnheim. Gunnheim is a co-op focused twin-stick shooter in which you play Viking warriors with big automatic and explosive weaponry. Your goal varies each stage, but mainly you will be focusing on mowing down minions with your machine gun in an attempt to reach the end of the level. You start out the game with a machine gun, but throughout the level you will find a variety of futuristic weaponry that enables you to blast down your foes faster. In addition to guns, you also have two abilities. The first allows you to turn invincible and damage surrounding enemies for a short period of time, and the second allows you to quickly dash in whatever direction you are currently moving. The game is designed with the intent of playing with your friends, and thus even in early access, both online and local 4-player co-op are in the game. Friendly fire is enabled, however, so having good coordination with your team is important to avoid blowing each other to pieces. The gameplay overall is nothing extremely unique, but does a good job of being a solid twin-stick shooter. The recoil on the guns and overall gore give the game a feeling of strength, and you feel like the gun you're shooting is massively powerful, not only because you were able to mow down enemies with it, but because your character is being pushed back by every shot. As far as I can tell, besides the boss fights being every 5 levels, what order the levels come up in is completely random. The random level order and aspect of surprise is actually what I consider to be one of the strongest and most unique aspects of Gunnheim. During the game, unless you're at a boss stage, you will never know what challenge you will be facing next, whether it will be running away from poison smog or destroying enemy spawn points. Most of the levels have a unique mechanic to them that forces you to think on your feet. While I think this system is great, the game could benefit from implementing a requirement of forcing players to start back at level 1 after their party is defeated. What I noticed was oftentimes my group would go into levels only half-heartedly to try the first time and figure out the map, since there was no consequence to the overall progression if we all died. The design of the maps greatly benefits from surprising the players, and having nearly no consequence to death ruins the surprise factor on some occasions. The weapons in Gunnheim are all fun and satisfying to use, but I do have some major criticisms of the current gun system. Firstly, the guns are completely unbalanced, even for a game that is about big guns and explosions. The laser gun especially has the ability to melt any enemy instantly, including bosses. Upon reaching the golem boss for the first time, I was in the fight for less than 10 seconds because a laser drop allowed me to completely annihilate him. Secondly, there is currently no way to change your guns after you pick up one without running out of ammo or picking up another weapon. Oftentimes when moving through the levels quickly, you will pick up a gun crate unexpectedly, just by running through enemies. Getting a gun unexpectedly and not being able to change back to your default weapon can interrupt your flow of killing, especially if you go from a standard automatic weapon to a single shot gun. Being able to change back and forth between your power weapon and your standard weapon would allow you to use them much more strategically. My thoughts on the aesthetics of Gunnheim are extremely mixed. On one hand, I love the look of the world and the general theme that is going on in Gunnheim. The game has a cartoon, cel-shaded look and a Viking universe that fits the idea of the game well. Characters look unique, vibrant, and heroic, and the environment feels both alive and battle-scarred, as you would imagine a Viking war zone with futuristic weaponry would be. However, I feel like the interesting character models will be infinitely better if they were complemented with some interesting personalities. As it currently stands, there's nothing implemented into the game that tells about the lore or reasoning behind why this conflict exists. The existence of Vikings fighting what seems to be aliens or mutants in a futuristic yet medieval setting oozes possibility in terms of lore potential. The bosses are well crafted and distinctly unique visually, but would have so much more character if they had at least some dialogue. For example, one of the bosses in the game is called the Bearded Woman, and she is basically a woman with a bearded male Viking head and a cat. But she lacks any kind of dialogue or personality that would explain what the heck she actually is. The game has a silly theme, and while there's a serious amount of action, I feel like Gunnheim developers should embrace its silly nature by enhancing the characters with at least some level of dialogue. One other minor criticism about the aesthetics is the music. There is currently only one track in the game as far as I've heard, and while it's not a bad track, it loops constantly to the point where after an hour or so you'll have to turn it off to maintain your sanity. The game is priced at $10, and while I definitely feel like the game will grow into this price, As it currently stands, there really isn't enough content to justify an early purchase. The biggest criticism I have of the game is the game simply doesn't have enough levels. Currently the game has a little over a dozen levels, with 2 of them being boss fights, resulting in the playtime required to beat the game being less than an hour. As an early access game, this is completely understandable, and as time goes on, this problem will get less and less pronounced as more levels get implemented into the game. Having more levels will also drastically increase the replayability of the game, but in order for the replayability to reach its max potential, I definitely think more challenge needs to be added, whether through the method of resetting party progress on death that I mentioned earlier, or some other means the developers come up with. Gunnheim is scheduled for an early release in October 2015, and while I applaud the developers for wanting to finish the game in a timely fashion, I am worried that this is not enough time to implement all the upgrades needed to make Gunnheim the truly great game that it could be. As it currently stands, Gunnheim is in need of a significant increase in the number of levels, and looking from the speed of the game and my general feelings while playing it, I would like to see an upwards of 50 additional levels and at least 8 to 10 more bosses before I can really say this game has enough content to completely satisfy me. While it seems like a huge increase relative to the number of levels currently implemented, the game's design is one that benefits exponentially from having a bigger pool of levels to choose from, so the more levels the better. One thing that I have not mentioned that I would also like to see in the future of Gunnheim is a bit more structure to the overall progression through the game. As it stands, you beat 4 levels and then fight a boss, but because the levels are random, you don't really feel like you're progressing into more difficult territory. I don't want the game to lose its random level selection design, but maybe separating the level pools into progressively harder sets instead of all levels being possible at all times could give the game a better feeling of progression. Gunnheim has a more than decent premise and solid gameplay to build on during its time in early access. However, Gunnheim still has quite a bit more work to be done to it in order for it to be an experience that you can truly get your money's worth from. If you're really looking for a fun 4-player co-op experience, I can safely say that you should keep an eye on Gunnheim, but wait a little bit longer, and you may be rewarded for your patience with a better and more complete version of this already decent twin-stick shooter. Thank you for watching my play, wait, or avoid review of Gunnheim. If you would like to buy the game, a link to the Steam store page is in the description below. And if you would like to see more of my content, subscribe and check out my channel where I do reviews, news, and other gaming commentary, such as my review of Submerged, a post-apocalyptic exploration game that prides itself on having no combat, or this past week's episode of PC Gaming News Weekly, where I talk about the Journey of the Light scam on Steam, the EU Commission proposing an end to regional differences in digital game prices, and World of Warcraft dropping over 44% of its subscribers in about 6 months.